Hello learners, hope you are doing well. So I welcome you all to the week 1 graded assignment solution video where we'll be solving the graded assignments and hopefully by the end of the video you'll have a better understanding of the subject and it will probably act as a revision for you as well. So without further ado, I think we should go on to the first question. So the first question states that actually this question is for the questions 1 to 3. So let's read the literature. What will be the values of A, B and C after execution of the following procedure using the scores dataset? So here we've been given a number of steps and we have to use this procedure and you should go to the scores dataset and find the answer for the questions that follow. So let's go to the steps. The step 1 states arrange all the cards in a single pile called pile 1. So I think that's an easy procedure to follow, so you just have to look through the cards. Then the second step is that you have to maintain 3 variables A, B, C and initialize them to 0. So that's also another easy step. You just have to take a variable A, keep it as 0, a variable B, keep that as 0, and another variable C and initialize it to 0. So once you've initialized all 3 variables to 0, you then go through step 3. So step 3 states that if pile 1 is empty, then stop the iteration. So we'll come this step as of now in the first iteration is of no use to us, but we'll see how this step actually becomes useful in the coming steps. So the next step states that read the top card in pile 1. So as you all would be knowing that scores dataset will be having a lot of cards and they'll be stacked in piles as you might have seen from the lecture videos, and we take the top card and we read it. So the first card that we read, what do we have to do? Well, let's go to the next step. Step 5 says that if the date of birth is less than May 1, then increment A. So what do you mean by less than May 1? It means that anybody born between 1st of Jan all the way to the 30th of April. Sorry about that. So all the way to 30th of April. So if you find any card that falls, whose birthday falls in this range, then you have to increment A. What do you mean by increment A? Well, you just take the value of A and you add 1 to it. That's all you have to do. So in case you find a person whose birthday falls between 1st of Jan and the 30th of April, well, this is what you do. And why do I keep saying 30th of April when it's given as 1st May? Well, because you have to look at the conditional statement. It says that it should be less than May 1st, which means that the 1st of May is not included. Similarly, you go to step 2, you go to step 6, the next step, and you see that if the date of birth falls between, here it says that greater than 30 April and less than 1st September. So what does it mean? Greater than 30 April does not include 30 April. That means in this case, the birthday should fall between the 1st of May and you see here that it says the 1st of September, but 1st of September is not included, which means you have to go to 31st of August. So if you find a birthday that falls between the 1st of May and the 31st of August, well, all you have to do is increment B by 1 and there you go. That's the next thing that you have to do. So as you know that as you go through these steps, in each iteration you can only increment one variable as each birthday will only fall on either one of these ranges. So now if you go to your step 7, you say that if your date of birth is greater than 31st August. So what is the meaning of greatest? Which means the 31st August is not included. So the next date of 31st October, which means that the 1st of September all the way to the end of the year, that is 31st of December. So anybody's birthday that falls in this range, well, that's when you have to increment C, and there you have to do C is equal to C plus 1. So now you know how to do it. So anyway, let's just move to step 8 so that we get a complete picture. So then you have to complete this step 7, move to step 8, where you say that you move the current card to another pile called pile 2 and repeat the step from step 3. So this is right now your loop. You go from step 8 to step 3, which means that you, after your first iteration, you don't have to go through step 1 and step 2. So now you know that you have a pile of card, pile 1, and you have a hypothetical pile called pile 2. So what happens is, each time you look at a card, you see its date of birth, you put that into pile 2. So this card is now no longer in pile 1, it is now in pile 2. Same thing happens with your next card, where it goes from pile 1 to pile 2 and so on, until the last card moves to pile 2, wherein you read this card, you do all the steps, then from step 8 you move all the way to step 3, and there you see in pile 1 if there are any more cards. So once the last card moves over to pile 2, your pile 1 is empty, which means that you can now stop the iteration. So the number of cards that there are there in the pile, well, that many times the iteration will go on, and you will find out the answers for A, B and C. So anyway, let's go to the questions. So the first question is the value of A. So to save time, I've already sorted the scores data set, and these are all the people that I found whose date of birth falls below the 1st of May or before the 1st of May. So as you can see here, you can just count here manually that there are 10 people whose birthday fall below the or behind 1st May, and therefore your answer for A is 10. So you can just input the value of 10 here, and that's your answer. So for the question number 2, it says that what will be the value of B? Well, that's an easy question, because the value of B, again, I have sorted the data set, and as you can see here, there are 9 cards, which means there are 9 people whose birthday follows between the ranges of 30th April and 1st September. The extremities are not included, so actually this falls between the 1st of May and the 31st of August. So these are the people whose birthday follows in that range, and there are a total of 9 people, as you can see. So that's your answer for the second question. So you just have to input the value of 9 here and you get the answer. Now moving on to the third question. The third question states that you have to find the value of C. Well, again, just go through the data set and you'll find out that there are 11 people whose birthdays fall on after the 31st of August, which means 31st of August is not included. You have to start counting people whose birthdays fall from September 1 and forward. So therefore there are 11 people in this list, so all you have to do is input the number 11 in the blank provided, and that's your right answer. So moving on to the next question, which is question number 4. It states, what will variable A represent after execution of the following procedure on the words dataset? So let's read the steps. The step 1 states you to arrange all the cards in a single pile called pile 1. So that's a standard procedure. And now you see step 2, it says that maintain 2 variables A, B and initialize them to 0. So as we know, we have to take 2 variables, that is A, give the value of 0, and another variable B, and this also will have the value 0. So in the first iteration you have 2 variables A and B whose values will be initialized to 0. So you now see step 3 states, if pile 1 is empty, then stop the iteration. So this step will not be of use to us until we reach the last card in the pile. Now going on to step 4, it states that read the top card in pile 1. Step 5 states that if the part of speech is a noun, then increment B. So if the part of speech is a noun, then you have to increment the value of B. So which means that you have a field known as part of speech in your words data set. If that part of speech is a noun, then what you have to do is you have to increment the value of B by 1. So let's see what the following step states. The next step states that step 6, if the word does not end with a full stop, then execute step 9. So that means, let's say you have a sentence here, you have, let's say, 6 words, and the last word ends with a full stop. So now you have found a noun, suppose on the third word in the sentence. So once you reach step 6, it will see that you have a word in the middle of the sentence which does not end with a full stop, obviously. So in that case, you would directly have to go to step 9, which states that move the current card to another pile called pile 2 and repeat from step 3. So you have to again go back to step 3 and then go from the next word. So the next word will be the next word in the sentence. So then you keep on moving until you reach the end of the sentence. So suppose you found a noun on the third word and now the sixth word. So the sixth word is the word that will be ending with a full stop. So what will happen in that case? Well, let's find out. So it states that step 7, that if the word ends with a full stop and b is equal to 1. So this is a very important condition that they've given here. If the word ends with a full stop and b is equal to 1, only then will we increment a. So let's understand the logic for the second. So suppose in this scenario that I have given you, you found a noun on the third word in the sentence, which means that after this iteration you have incremented the value of b to 1, b by 1 in fact. So since it was 0, it will now be 1 in this iteration. Then when you go forward, you found another word in the sentence in fact with a noun. Then the value of b would now be incremented by 1 and would now be equal to 2. But what does step 7 state? Step 7 states that the word should end with a full stop and the value of b should be equal to 1. But in this case you can see that the value of b is 2, because now it has found 2 nouns in the same sentence. So what does it mean? So let's, anyway, before going into the options, let's just see what happens in step 8. In step 8, once you've incremented the value of a by 1 and you have found out this condition that satisfies your step, you reset the variable in fact of b to 0, and then you again go back to step 3 and take the next card, which will be the first word of the next sentence. So now we have shifted your focus to the next sentence of the paragraph. So what's happening here? So you see that once your b goes above the value of 1, which means that there are more than one nouns in the sentence, it's basically a useless affair. Basically, you don't want to know a word, you don't want a sentence to have more than one noun. That's basically what this procedure wants you to do. It wants you to find out all the sentences in this paragraph which have only one noun. So interestingly enough, you have this option in option number 2, where it states that the value of a would represent the total number of sentences. As you can see here, the total number of sentences with only one noun in it, because as you see, b should be 1 and the word should end with a full stop. So once you have a noun in the last sentence of the word, last word of the sentence in fact, only then will your b be equal to 1. Your value of a is going to be incremented and your b then gets reset to 0 in step 8. So all this can only be satisfied by option number 2, which is the total number of sentences with only one noun in it. So let's just move on to the next question, that is question number 5. So as we can see here, from the question we can see the given procedure finds the category which has generated the highest revenue between electronics and stationery. So this one keyword here is revenue. When executed on the shopping bills dataset, fill in the blanks from the given choices and complete the procedure. So let's go over the steps once. So the step 1 states, arrange all cards in a single pile called pile 1. So we have been doing this in the previous questions where this is a standard step. Step 2 is the blank. So let's move forward, because we know that in the step 2 we need to initialize some variable. So we need to know what kind of value is going to be incremented or fitted into them, so that we know how to initialize these variables. Anyways, let's move forward. Step 3 is that if pile 1 is empty, then stop the iteration and start from step 8. So again, in the first few iterations, this particular step is not going to be important to us until we reach the last card on the pile. Then step 4 is that read the top card in pile 1. So then what does step 5 state? Step 5 says that if the bill contains one or more items with category electronics, then add the cost of all such items to e-cost. So when you say add, we know that e-cost, and subsequently we see that step 6 is that if bill contains one or more items with category stationery, then again add the cost of all such items to S cost, which means that E cost and S cost are both integers. How do we know that? Because we're adding some sort of numbers into these variables. So we're incrementing the value by a certain value, such as the cost or the total cost of all the electronics and stationery items into them. So which means that in step 2 we have to initialize the value of E cost and S cost such that they can add values into them. So what sort of initialization that can we do that can start from a sort of a zero number and then keep on adding to it? Well, you can only add an integer to 0, because we cannot add them to a none value. So looking at this first option, there are two options that are out now, that is option number 2 and option number 4, since we cannot add an integer to the none value. So now these two options are out, which means that we are looking at any option between option 1 and option 3. Anyway, let's move forward. So step 7 states that move the current card to another pile called pile 2 and repeat from step 3. Fine. So now let's see that we have gone from all the cards from pile 1 to pile 2, which means that we have finished all the cards from pile 1 and we have shifted it over to pile 2. Now let's move over. So it states that if all your pile 1 is empty, then you have to start from step 8. So let's move to step 8. Step 8 is again something blank here. So let's see what do we have to do in step 8. So step 9 states that if E cost is greater than S cost, then store electronics in higher. So you see, electronics is given in quotes, and also electronics is a set of alphabets, which means that it's a string. So can you store a string in, say, 0? Can you store a string in a number? Well, that's not possible, because you can only store a string in a none value, because electronics is, as of now, electronics is not a number. It's just a string, and it is a set of words or a set of letters, and they cannot be added to an integer, which means that from our options of 1 and 3 that we have shortlisted, we know that you cannot add a string to a number, which means that the only viable option with us right now is that we maintain the two variables E cost and S cost, initialize them to 0 in step 2, and in step 8 what we do is we maintain a variable higher and initialize it to none, because only none can we add or store the letters or words that we can see. So which means that your correct answer for this question is option 3. Now moving on to question number 6. So now question number 6 states, what will the given procedure compute and store in variable X if executed on the shopping bills dataset? So let's go through the steps one by one. So the first step is arrange all the cards in a single pile called pile 1. That's standard procedure again. Maintain 3 variables A, B, C and initialize them to 0. So now that we know that we have to initialize integer variables to 0, so that's also sorted here, because we know that A, B and C are now integer variables. Step 3 states that if pile 1 is empty, then stop the iteration and start from step 9. This is also an important step once we are done with the last card in pile 1. The next step is that read the top card in pile 1. Now step 5 states if the shop name is SV Stores and the customer name is Neeraja, then set A equal to 1. So this is a very important thing. Here we are not incrementing the value of a is equal to a plus 1. That means we are not incrementing the value of 1 every time we see SP stores and Nirja. So the first time that we see SP stores, the customer Nirja has gone to the store called SP stores, we just set the value of a to 1. So even if we see it the next time, the value of a would not change. It would still remain a is equal to 1, which means that even if Nirja has visited SP stores 10 times, at the end of execution, a would always remain to 1, or will always be set to 1. Now step 6 states that if the shop name is Big Bazaar and again the customer's name is Nirja, then we set b to 1. Again, if Nirja has gone to Big Bazaar no matter 10 times, 15 times or even 20 times, at the end of execution the value of b would still remain 1. Now we see that if the shop name is Sun General and again the customer's name is Nirja, then we see that we set the value of c is equal to 1. So as you can see that here we are seeing that if Nirja has visited either of SP stores, Big Bazaar or Sun General at least once, and if she has visited SP stores at least one, the value of a would be 1. If she has visited Big Bazaar at least once, the value of b would be equal to 1. And if she has visited Sun General at least once, then the value of c would be equal to 1. So we are not counting the number of times that Nirja has gone to each store. We are just seeing if Nirja has visited either all of these stores or at least one of these stores once. Okay, now that we've done with this, then we move to step 8 and we see that we move the current card to another pile called pile 2 and then repeat from step 3. So let's say now we are at the last card of pile 1. We are done with this step. We start from step 9. So now step 9 states that we have to maintain a variable x and initialize it to 0, which means again x is an integer variable and we initialize it to 0. Step 10 states that if a is equal to 1, then increment x. So when is a equal to 1? As we have seen here, if Nirja has visited SV stores at least once, if she has, then a would be equal to 1 and x would be incremented. Here you see that x is going to be incremented by 1 every time that you go through this step and a is equal to 1. Step 11 states that if b is equal to 1, then increment x again. So now let's say that in the first iteration x was 0 and there is a scenario where she has visited all the shops at least once, which means that in the step 9 your x was equal to 0. Then you go to step 10 and you see that a is equal to 1, you increment x by 1, which means that x is equal to 1 at the end of step 10. You go to step 11 and you see that if b is equal to 1, then increment x, which means again you increment the value of x by 1, which means now it is 2. And in the end you see that if c is equal to 1, then increment x, which means you again increment the value of x by 1, which takes its total value to 3. But there could also be a case where Nirja had not visited any of these stores, which means that a could be equal to 0, b could be equal to 0 and c could also be equal to 0, which means in this scenario x would never be incremented and the final value would be 0. So the range of x in this case would be between 0 and 3. Therefore, what does this show you? Well, let's go to the options and find out actually what is this question trying to tell us. So the first option is that the number of times Nirja has visited SV stores. Well, we know that we are not counting the number of times Nirja has visited any of these stores, because you know that we are not incrementing the value of a, b or c each time she has visited a store. We are only setting its value to 1 if she has visited the store. So the first 3 options are out because we are not counting anything in this problem. We are just finding out if she has gone to a particular store at least once. The fourth option states that it is the number of stores which Nirja has visited. Well, from this you can see that she had visited SV stores, she had visited, let's say, Big Bazaar, and the third store that she had visited is Sun General. And in this particular scenario you saw that x was equal to 3, which means she has visited all 3 stores. Well, let's say in scenario 2, what we saw was she had neither visited SV stores, nor had she visited Big Bazaar, nor had she visited Sun General, in which case the value of x was 0, which means that x is actually counting the number of stores that she has visited. So as you can see that your correct answer is actually option number 4. Well, just look at the next option. Let's see the number of stores which Neerja has never visited. Well, this is actually the opposite of the correct answer, because we are not counting the number of stores she has not visited. We are counting in fact the number of stores that she has visited, because if she has visited 3 stores, the value of x would be 3. If she has not visited any store, the value of x would be 0. So we are actually counting the number of stores that Neerja has visited. So the correct answer for option number, or question number 6 is option number 4, the number of stores which Neerja visited. Now moving to question number 7, it states that the following procedure counts the number of words from the words dataset where part of speech is noun. So let's keep this underlined. Noun is the part of the speech, and letter count is greater than or equal to 4. So letter count should be greater than or equal to 4. But the programmer may have made mistakes in one or more steps. Identify all such steps, if any. And this is a multiple select question. So please keep this in mind, because you may have one or more errors in this code. So let's start reading through the steps. So the step 1 is that you have to arrange all cards in a single pile called pile 1. So that's a standard procedure. I don't think there is any error here. So there are no errors here. Step 2 is that you have to maintain a variable count and initialize it to 1. So as you can see that we have got a first error, because now if we start our count from 1, we'll always end up with, let's say, the number of nouns whose letter count is greater than 4, and we'll always have a number that is 1 greater than the total number of nouns whose letter count is greater than 4, which means that this is an erroneous line and this is going to be our first error. So we'll mark it right away. So this is our first error. But remember that this is a multiple select question, so we need to keep moving forward. So your step 3 states, if pile 1 is empty, then stop the iteration. Well, this is a standard step and there is no error here, because this is what we do in every other programming, in fact. Now step 4 states, read the top card in pile 1. Again, no error here. This is a standard step. Step 5 states that if part of speech is a verb, you've already got an error here, because you see that the part of speech was supposed to be a noun, but in here now it's a verb. Even though the letter count is right here, it is greater than or equal to 4, but we already have one error in this line, which is a major error, and so this step is again erroneous. So again you have step 5, which is erroneous, and step 6 is quite standard, because it states that you have to move the current card to another pile called pile 2 and repeat from step 3, which is also a standard step, which means we have 2 errors in this program, which is your step 2 and your step 7. So these are your correct answers. Now moving to question number 8. So the question reads, the given information represents a shopping bill and it may have some mistakes with respect to the sanity of data. So here, this is what you have to find. You have to find the sanity of the data. Identify all rows with such mistakes. And again, you've been given here that this is a multiple select question. So let's go row by row. So row 1 is a cereal which comes under packed food, whose quantity is 1. The price and cost both match, because you only have one item of this taken, which means that you have to multiply the price by 1 and you get the total cost. So this row has no errors in it, in fact. Moving over to row 2, you see that you have the item as milk, but here it has been put in the category of fruits, which makes it wrong, because As we all know that milk falls under the category of dairy. So which means that this row is the first row that has an error in it. So row 2 is the first row with an error, but again this is a multiple select question, which means that you have to look for more errors if there are any. So now going over to row 3, you see you have cupcakes, which comes under packed food. You have taken one of them, and its unit cost is, or unit price is 1 or 25. You multiply it by 1 and you get the total cost as 25. So this row also looks decent. The next row is row 4, where you have bought chocolates, which comes under packed food. You've bought one of them. The unit cost of these chocolates is 10, but as you can see that you've been charged 100 for buying one chocolate, because this also should be 10, as you're multiplying 10 by 1 and you should get the total cost of 10, which means that row 4 is now erroneous. So you have ticked row 4 as well. Now let's move to row 5. Row 5 is shirts, which comes under women apparel. So here you see that you have somehow purchased 1.5 shirt. As you know that this is not possible, because you can't ask the shopkeeper to give you half a shirt, which means that this row again is erroneous, because you cannot purchase half a shirt, which means now row 5 is also erroneous. So at the end you have 3 options that are right. You have option number 2, which is row 2, row 4 and row 5 that are the correct answers. So that is the end of question number 8. Moving over to question number 9. So the question reads, select the most appropriate data type for a variable representing the number of students in a class. Number. So what does that tell you? Well, that number falls under the integer type, or the variable type of integer. So let's see if integer is in the list. Well, it is. So the first option is the correct answer for question number 9, which is integer. Moving on to the 10th question. Select the most appropriate data type for variable representing an email address. So an email address is a string of characters. So it is not a single character, but it is a string of characters, which means that your option number 4, string, is the correct answer for question number 10. For question number 11, we have to select the most appropriate data type for a variable representing the position of a word in a sentence. So how do we represent the position of a word? Well, we count the number of words. That's how we do it. So let's say you start counting from 0, or let's say for simplicity's sake, let's say we start counting from 1. So this is the first word, followed by the second, third, fourth, fifth and sixth word in the sentence. So now how do you represent the position? I want to say capture the fourth word. Well, you just give the number 4, and 4, as you know, is an integer, so the correct answer for this is the integer. So integer is how you represent the position of a word in a sentence. Moving on to question number 12, we have to select the most appropriate data type for a variable representing the state of an electric switch. So an electric switch has just 2 states. For those of you who are not familiar with the concept, an electric switch has two states. It's either in the off position, where there is no current flowing through it. So there is no current flowing through it, which means that the circuit is open. So let's represent this by a 0. The other state is where your circuit is now closed and electricity is flowing right through the circuit, in which the circuit is on, or it is in the state of 1. So as you can see that there are only now 2 states for this electric circuit, which is 0 and 1. And as we all know that there is only one data type that actually represents 2 states, which is a Boolean character, which gives either false or true as the states. So this is how we can represent the state of an electric switch using Booleans. Now the 13th question is, select the most appropriate data type for a variable representing the value of the mathematical constant pi. So as you all know that pi is a decimal, which means that we have something like 3.14, which is the value of pi. So this is not an integer. This actually has decimal places in it, which means that this is actually a float. A float data type is something that can represent integers, 3.15 or 4.67, just a random number that I've taken. So these are all decimal points. These are all numbers with decimal points which are represented aptly by the variable called float. So this is the data type that can represent decimals. Now moving on to the last question, that is question number 14. The question reads, interpret the following flowchart and answer the questions. Let A, B, C be three distinct integers given as input. So now let's go through this flowchart. So this is your start. This is where you start your program. You move over, you go and you input these three variables A, B and C. Then you initialize x to 0. So now you know that x is the integer variable type. Now what we do is we compare two of the values, two of the integers that have been inputted, that is A and B, and we see if A is greater than B. So if that is true, what do we check? We know that now A is greater than B in this order. Let's say this is the order, and we know now that A is greater than B. So if this is true, we now compare A with C. Now we see that if C is greater than A, which means now it comes higher than A in the sentence, in the order. If so, which means now you see that C is the greatest number amongst A, B and C. So we take the value of C and assign it to X. So now in this case, X is the largest of the three integers that you have assigned. Well, this is just one of the options, or this is just true in one case. Let's see if the same procedure or the same conditions follow for the others as well. Now let's go back to this particular decision. Let's see if C was not greater than A. That means, let's say that if A was greater than C, which means that C would have come somewhere here, because it is greater than A, it is not greater than B. So what would happen here? Here A has now become your largest integer among the three integers, which is why you have again assigned the value of the largest integer to X. Well, if you're not yet convinced, let's go back to this particular block where you have compared A and B, and let's say that now B was greater than A. So which means that this particular block would be false, because A is not greater than B. So it would follow this particular arrow, and here you could see that C was greater than B. In that case, again, let's see, in this case your A was smallest followed by B. Now if C was greater than B, C would follow this order and be the greatest or the largest integer among these three integers, which would make C the largest integer and again was assigned to X. If you're still not convinced, let's go to the final step where we see that if your B was greater than C, so C was not greater than B, which means it would either come below A or below B, between A and B, which would still make B the largest integer amongst A, B and C if it had followed this particular path, making X the largest value amongst A, B and C. So as you can see that from these four conditions, the value of X is always the largest value amongst A, B and C. We go to the options and we see that the value of X, that is this value, is always the largest value amongst A, B and C. So the answer for your question number 14 is that x is the largest value amongst A, B and C. So that's all for your week 1 graded assignment. I hope you've enjoyed learning a bit, you have solved the questions. I would advise you guys to go back and revise again so that giving the qualifiers would be that much easier. And see you all next week. Thank you.